Okay, so my pedigree is on the Modern Family from the ABC show. As you can see, we have generation 1 up here, generation 2 is this line, plus Joe and Manny, and then generation 3 is Lily and these 3 down here. So first looking at autosomal dominant, everybody in this top row would have to be recessive as they don't show the trait. So little b. Mitchell right here is the first one that doesn't make sense. He'd have to be little b, getting them from them. He shows the trait, so this already doesn't make sense. Everything else in the pedigree checks out except for Mitchell. Moving on to autosomal recessive. Anybody on this top row does not show the trait, so they have to either be homozygous or heterozygous dominant, which they are. Joe and Manny down here making sense. Manny getting big V from both. This one checks out. Claire checking out again, works. Mitchell could get a little B from both parents, so that makes sense. If we look at Lily really quick, she could be, would have to be colorblind if Mitchell and Cam were actually able to have a kid, but she's adopted. So she'd be colorblind. Phil comes into the family as recessive. All of this good stuff makes sense. Going on to X-linked dominant. Everybody in this top row is going to have to show recessive because they don't have it. Boys have the Y chromosome, just the one little B. These two ladies have the 2 little B's. Claire, little B makes sense. Mitchell, again, doesn't make sense because he would have to have X big B and a Y for him to be colorblind in the scenario, and he cannot get a big B from anybody, so he doesn't work again. X-linked recessive, everybody in this top row is going to have to show the dominant and not have the trait, so Dee is a heterozygous, Jay and Javier have to be X big B Y. So Claire's going to get big B from Jay and little b from Dee, that makes sense. Mitchell's going to get little b from Dee and Y from Jay, so that makes sense. And everybody else comes in and makes sense. Lily would also have to be colorblind in this scenario because Cam and Mitchell both show the trait, so X little b. And then lastly, looking at Y-linked. So if we just look at Jay and Javier to start, they both don't have the trait. They're going to be Y big B. Coming down here, Jay's going to have to give Mitchell that. So Mitchell would have to not show the trait for this to make sense. He'd have to be Y little b for him to have this, but the only possible explanation is that he's Y big B, so that, again, doesn't make sense.